Hi, my name is Wade Harrell. I'm the owner of the Harrell House Bug Museum. Normally, I would be doing programs at the Santa Fe Public Library over spring break. This year, because of the whole COVID-19 epidemic, we are not doing that. Of course, the library is closed, as is the Bug Museum, but we thought it would be fun to try to do a video for the library's YouTube channel, and that's what we're going to do today. And I'm going to show some of the bugs that I would have been bringing to the library. And I'm going to start with these guys. These are Madagascar hissing cockroaches. And cockroaches are plant eaters and decomposers in the environment. They eat rotten wood and leaves and other dead things they find on the forest floor. And most cockroaches are good guys in the environment. They eat the dead stuff outside and don't come in our houses. There are a few kinds that are pests in our homes, about 5 species, but there are more than 4,000 that are outdoor bugs that want nothing to do with our homes. And you can see we have multiple ages here. We have a youngster over there. And then you can see they come in a variety of colors. The colors don't indicate anything about sex or anything. They are highly variable. This one is a male, though. We can tell he's a male because he has little horns. These little bumps on his thorax there are horns. The males kind of use those to shove each other around like little bulldozers because they're kind of territorial. These other ones with the flatter thorax are females. And so these cockroaches would not survive in a house. If they escaped into your home, they would be dead within a week or two because they would not find enough water there to survive. They're fairly long-lived. These cockroaches can live a year or more, sometimes as long as 3 years. They can defend themselves by making a hissing sound like tss, tss, which mine don't do often because they get touched a lot, but every now and then they will do it. But not today. But they get used to being handled and are no longer frightened by people, so they don't always hiss. All right, let's try another bug. Now these guys are called blue death feigning beetles. And I'm enunciating there because I want people to get that second word, feigning. That means to pretend or fake. These beetles play dead as a defense. And they're not going to do it now, though. Believe it or not, they are not playing dead. They're just kind of slow moving, and they're just kind of not doing much right this second. But they're not playing dead. When they actually do play dead, they kind of curl up, and they do look very convincingly like a dead insect. And the reason they do that is most birds and lizards and other insect predators are looking for movement when they're hunting for bugs, and by not moving, they don't usually get noticed by those predators. But as with the cockroaches and their hissing, they do get used to being touched and don't play dead very often. They're from the Mojave Desert. It's extremely dry there. They have a waxy coating on their skin that keeps the moisture inside their body so they don't dry out in that harsh habitat. And they can survive there because of that, because it's so dry, and they get the water they need from plants they eat. They eat cacti and various desert shrubs and things like that, and they get enough moisture from that they don't need to ever actually drink water. These are also one of the longest lived insects. Most insects typically live a year or so at the most. These beetles can live sometimes over 10 years, with the record of 17 years in a laboratory setting, which is extremely long for an insect. Now I want to show another beetle. Now this is a piece of wood that these beetles have been eating. These guys are called, Patentleather beetles or best beetles. And they are really cool. These live throughout most of the country, actually. They're very familiar to me when I was a kid. Oh, look, you get a twofer there. There's a little isopod there as well. But so these guys are, they're called that. Patent leather, I mean, it's like the shiny leather appearance to them. And they live in logs. They eat rotten wood exclusively. And so they will, and they've done all this carving on this wood by eating it. And they're kind of social. Most beetles are solitary, don't really live together. But these creatures actually do live in groups. They can communicate with each other with some sounds, which you might even be able to hear it. A little bit of a chirping. I don't know if that'll come through in the video. But, and they live communally and actually provide care to their offspring. Like most insects, they lay their eggs, they leave, and the babies are on their own. But these beetles actually care for their larvae, and they even raise their larvae in groups. So they are kind of semi-social. So they're very interesting. And these live pretty much throughout the United States, anywhere where there are rotten logs. So in much of New Mexico, where there's not as many trees, they would be hard to find. But in the more forested areas, you can probably find these. This is, by the way, I'll mention this guy. That's an isopod, also called a roly-poly, pill bug. Sow bugs are known by a bunch of different names. One interesting thing about those guys is they are crustaceans. They actually are more closely related to crabs and lobsters than they are to insects. So they are actually a whole different group of arthropods, and one of the few crustaceans that live totally on land. They do have to live in moist areas, though, because like other crustaceans, they breathe with gills, and they need to keep those gills moist. This one is a millipede, and millipedes are plant eaters and decomposers. Much like the cockroaches, they eat dead leaves and rotten wood and things like that. We always provide natural dead leaves from outside for the millipedes, as well as giving them things like fruits and veggies also. And this is called a giant desert millipede. This is the largest species of millipede found in the United States. They can sometimes get 6 or 8 inches long, although typically they're much shorter than that. And like most millipedes, they have between 200 and 300 legs. We don't really know exactly how many legs, because millipedes can add legs as they grow. When they shed their skin, they may add a segment, and each segment has 4 legs. So it's hard to say exactly how many it has unless you took the time to try to count. But you can see how the legs are positioned on the bottom of the body, while there's arranged in 2 pairs per segment. And that's how we can tell a millipede from a centipede. And if I can real quickly lean over here, grab a centipede for you to see. I'm not going to handle a centipede because centipedes are venomous and can bite. But I'm going to take the lid off and get a shot of it looking down. This is a giant centipede. This is the largest centipede in the United States. They get up to 10 inches long, and they can give a very painful bite, so you do not want to handle them. But you can see how that guy has his legs sprawling out to the sides of his body, while the millipede's legs are underneath. Centipedes also move a lot quicker. They are predators. They have to catch prey. In the desert regions, we don't see centipedes that much during the dry season, but during the rainy seasons, they come to the surface to hunt, and they can be very common. This particular giant centipede is found in New Mexico, but more likely to be in southern New Mexico. Not super likely to see it up here in Santa Fe. This guy is called a vinegar rune. Vinegar runes are arachnids like spiders and scorpions. They have no venom. They don't bite or anything. They have a tail but no stinger. It's just a tail. They have powerful claws, but they usually do not want to pinch us. They can if they really wanted to, and every now and then I've had a vinegaroon give me a little hug with his claws, or he just kind of grabs, and I think mainly just kind of using them as extra feelers, because I've never had one pinch hard. Now apparently this is true for the vinegaroons that live in the United States, and as well as through Mexico and Central America and South America. Vinegaroons that live in Asia apparently will pinch pretty hard. So if you're ever in Malaysia, I wouldn't pick up the vinegaroons. Now they have this long tail here that they use mainly for spreading their odor around. When they defend themselves, they spray acetic acid from here, and they wag that tail around very fast to spread the odor around. And
Most animals find the smell of vinegar pretty distasteful. To us humans, it might smell like somebody's making some potent salad dressing, but otherwise it's not really that bad, at least if you like the smell of vinegar. And these guys are native to New Mexico. If they were ever going to come up with a official state arachnid, I would campaign pretty hard for this creature. They're one of my favorite creatures, and one of the main reasons I moved to New Mexico. Another neat thing about them is they don't see well. They find their way around by touching and feeling. These are actually his first set of legs. We call them antenniform legs because he uses them like antennas, and they even look like antennas, but they're actually legs because he is an arachnid, just like spiders and scorpions. And so he does have 8 legs, but the first 2 are used like antennas. They are also called whip scorpions because they do resemble a scorpion, but unlike scorpions, once again, no stinger. All right. Now this next guy, or girl, I'm going to show you, is a tarantula. This is called a choco golden knee tarantula. She's from South America. She is a very gentle tarantula. Most tarantulas that are from North or South America have defensive hairs on their abdomen we call urticating hairs. And to defend themselves, they will take their back leg and knock this hair off into the eyes or nose of a predator. It's like teeny tiny porcupine spines. Very irritating in the eyes or nose and very itchy on the skin. But because they have it, they do not need to bite. Biting is their last resort. She's actually very gentle and used to being handled, so she won't flick the hair at us now. But because they have it, she tends to have a much calmer demeanor than some of our relatives that live in Asia and Africa and Australia and Pacific Islands, where they do not have that hair as a defense and they defend themselves by biting. I do not generally handle tarantulas from the Eastern Hemisphere for that reason, because they are more than willing to bite. We have tarantulas here in New Mexico, of course, and if you're ever out in the fall and then out in the country, you may encounter male tarantulas looking for females. That is the breeding season around here. You'll see them crossing roads and things like that. They don't want to harm you. I don't recommend picking them up because they might be scared enough to bite, but they usually don't. But they're just looking for mates. And the males at that point are at the end of their life. If they find a female and manage to mate, that's great. If they manage to get away without being eaten by the female, that's even better. But he will end up dying usually at the end of the breeding season regardless, because it'll start getting cold and he's at the end of his lifespan anyway. Females, on the other hand, might live for decades. We don't even really know what the upper limit is for tarantulas. The record in captivity was 35 years for a Mexican red-knee tarantula, but that one was not a baby when this particular zoo acquired it, so we don't really know how old it was to begin with. So it might have been much older. All right, well, that is all of my invertebrates that I was going to show today. But I usually, for my library programs, I'll bring some of our reptiles and amphibians as well, and I'll show you a few of those. This next one, and this, by the way, is just a temporary holding container. This is not what he lives in. But this is a toad. This is called a Western Woodhouse toad. Toads a lot of people ask what's the difference between a toad and a frog, and it's a trick question because toads are frogs. They're just one family of frogs, and what separates the toad family from other frogs are the presence of these poison glands right here behind the eyes. See this big bump there? These are full of a pretty toxic poison that if an animal were to try to eat this toad and punctured that poison sac, it would get in the animal's mouth and it would be very unpleasant. Most animals, it'll cause dogs and cats and things to foam at the mouth for this kind of toad. And some types of toads have extremely toxic glands that can even kill a dog or a cat. But Generally, you don't get the poison on you if you handle the toad. It is good when you pick up an amphibian to make sure your hands are a little bit moist. He was sitting on wet moss when I picked him up, so my hands are a little bit moist. That's safer for him, not so much for me, but it does make it safe for him and less uncomfortable on his skin if my hands are a little bit moist. And these toads in the desert regions. This is a common toad here in the Santa Fe area. They survive there by going underground during the dry months and only coming out during the rainy season in late summer to breed in temporary pools and things. This is another desert amphibian. This is a tiger salamander. Once again, I'm going to moisten my hands once again. I'll pick them up. Tiger salamanders, like toads, have poison glands behind their heads as well. They have the carotid glands as the toads do, and that protects them. They also have poisonous skin secretions. So it is good to think about, salamanders and be prepared to wash your hands after handling them if you handle them in the wild. But this one is accustomed to being handled. It isn't releasing its toxins. I have seen them do that. They release a poison that's kind of a milky white stuff, and if you get that on you, you want to wash it off as soon as possible. But tiger salamanders are kind of mysterious. A lot of people are surprised to see that this creature would live in this region, but they spend almost all their time underground. They're buried in the soil. They come out in the springtime as the snows are melting, forming temporary pools, and they'll go there to mate, lay their eggs, which hatch into a gilled larva form, and they live in water for the first part of their lives, like all amphibians, and then they'll lose those gills and then move to the land and go underground. They call this family of salamanders mole salamanders because they live underground almost all the time. They're burrowers. And now, let me just step off camera and wipe my hands off real quick, and I will move to the reptiles. This little guy is a very popular pet reptile right now. This is a crested gecko. And if you look carefully, you'll see these little spines over his eyes and on the back of his head. That's how he gets his name. That's his crest. These lizards are native to New Caledonia, which is an island kind of near Australia. And they were thought to be extinct. They were just first discovered more than 100 years ago, but they've been thought to be extinct for most of that time because they were unable to find any. But then they discovered a different island that still had them. So they were not extinct, and they've turned out to breed very easily in captivity, and they become hugely popular as pets, entirely captive bred. And like most geckos, he does have sticky pads. Not all geckos have that, but the majority of them do, and they help him climb. He's a good climber. He's also a good jumper, so I have to watch carefully because he might decide to jump somewhere else. One thing that's neat about these geckos is most geckos are insect eaters, and this guy does like insects, but his favorite, there he goes. His favorite food is fruit. So we give him a prepared diet that's made mainly from fruit and also has vitamins and minerals. It's a very good diet for these guys. So it's another thing that makes them popular as pets, because you can buy a food that they don't have to eat that's alive. Like many geckos, he does not have eyelids. His eyes are always open. He has a clear scale that covers those eyes. This is one lizard I always bring. This is a bearded dragon. We have several bearded dragons here. This one is named Demi. He's probably our largest bearded dragon, and he's also one of our squirmiest. But bearded dragons originate in Australia. They come from a very dry, deserty climate, not too different from New Mexico, although a bit hotter there than it is here. They are omnivores. They eat fruits and veggies, and they also like meat in the form of bugs and worms and things like that. They've become enormously popular as pets in this country, probably because they breed in captivity very easily, they're easy to take care of, and they don't get too big. However, if you did want to get this or any other reptile as a pet, do a lot of research first, because there is still a lot of specialized information you need to know. They have to have specialized lights, they need a very hot basking site, and they need a fairly large tank. Not as big as some other creatures, but still, you have to think about it before you get one. The reason we have so many is they get donated to us from people who no longer can take care of them for whatever reason. I think Demi was actually very well loved by his family, but unfortunately they had another pet, a dog, that would not leave Demi alone and wanted to growl and bark at his tank all the time and all this kind of stuff. But if you look at Demi from the side, you'll see he's real spiky looking. But these spikes are not rigid. They won't hurt you or anything. They're more for helping him with camouflage than they are for defense. They're not really armor, they're more for hiding. Because when he's on the ground in kind of an open spaces in his natural habitat, birds of prey would pick him out very easily, but those spikes help his shadow to blend in with his background, so he makes him a little harder to see on the ground. And they're called bearded dragons because they can puff up their throat if they're angry, trying to intimidate a predator, or more often just trying to intimidate each other. They will puff up their throats, which the skin underneath is black, so it'll look like he has a big, bushy black beard. In captivity, they don't do it all that often unless they see another bearded dragon or they're frightened by something. Finally, we do like to bring out a snake, and this is a ball python. As with most of our reptiles here at the Bug Museum, it was also donated as somebody's former pet. A lot of reptiles live much longer than people anticipate. Ball pythons, for example, can live 15 to 20 years, sometimes longer. And so they are around quite a while. We've had this one is named Everard. This ball python is actually one of the first reptiles that was ever donated to us when he first opened the Bug Museum about 8 years ago. Ball pythons are enormously popular as pets. They don't get too big. This is a typical adult size, and so they do make a good they do make a moderate sized pet snake that is never going to get big enough to hurt a person. However, you still have to think about, can I get rats and rodents for it to eat? Because they are predators, they eat rodents. Will you be able to keep it for 15 to 20 years? These are the kind of things you have to consider before getting a reptile. But if you do choose a pet snake, the ball pythons are a pretty good choice. They don't get too large. And they're usually docile. We've had a few ball pythons here that have not been super nice, that are display only, that we don't handle, because they will bite you. but usually they're pretty gentle-natured. Well, that is all my animals I usually bring to the library. Afterwards, now I'm going to go use some hand sanitizer, and then I'm also going to wash my hands with soap and water, which is highly recommended, especially after handling reptiles, because they can carry salmonella, and it's never a bad idea to clean your hands after touching any animal. Thank you.